In the autumn of 1888, a man named Dr. Caleb Morrow received a letter at his office in Richland Center, Wisconsin. Morrow was not a young physician. He was 54 years old, the county's chief medical examiner for 16 years, a graduate of the Chicago Medical College, a man whose professional reputation rested on a single principle he had stated publicly more than once, that his signature meant exactly what it said, no more and no less. The letter asked him to travel to a farm 7 miles north of town, to examine a set of remains uncovered during a drainage excavation, and to certify his findings in a formal report that had already been drafted. It was that last detail, the report already drafted before the examination, that Morrow noted in his private journal when he recorded the letter's arrival. He wrote only one sentence. He wrote, "They have already decided what I will find." He went anyway. 3 days later, Dr. Caleb Morrow returned to his office in Richland Center, sat down at his desk, picked up his pen, and set it down again. The drafted report sat in front of him unsigned. It would remain unsigned for the rest of his life. The remains he had examined, and he had examined them for the better part of a full day, the way a man who trusts only his own hands examines something he cannot explain, were not what the drafted report said they were. And Dr. Caleb Morrow, in 16 years of signing his name to things, had never once signed his name to something he knew to be false. He was not going to start in 1888. Richland County, Wisconsin, sits in the southwestern corner of the state, pressed between the Wisconsin River to the north and the Kickapoo Valley to the west. It is hill country, carved by glacial meltwater into a landscape of steep coulees and narrow floodplains and creek bottoms that stay soft well into June. The soil is deep. Things buried in it stay buried for a very long time. By 1888, Richland County had been settled for roughly 40 years. The farms along the Pine River drainage were productive. The timber had been cleared, the roads were passable, and the mounds, the low earthen structures the first surveyors had noted along every creek line in the county, had been, for the most part, ploughed under, or simply ignored in the way that people who need to grow food ignore things that do not help them grow it. But 1888 was a drought year across the upper Midwest. Water tables dropped. Creek beds that had run year-round went dry for the first time in living memory. Farmers in the Pine River Valley, trying to reclaim marginal land, dug drainage channels deeper than they ever had before. And in the floor of one of those channels, on a farm owned by a man named August Kellner, something came up that no plough had ever reached. The Richland County Observer ran the first account on October 3rd, 1888. The report was careful, the kind written by an editor who knows that the more extraordinary the claim, the more precisely it must be worded. The bones, the Observer reported, were of human form. The individual femur recovered from the channel floor measured by the county surveyor's instrument, 38 inches in length. The skull was largely intact and of proportionate scale. The height of the individual, extrapolated from the long bones in the standard manner, was estimated at between 8 feet 2 inches and 8 feet 9 inches. The Observer did not speculate, it reported. And what it reported was impossible by any framework of North American prehistory available to a Wisconsin newspaper editor in 1888. By October 7th, a representative of the Bureau of Ethnology had arrived in Richland Center. His name appears in the county court records as Mr. Harrison Aldred. He carried credentials from the Smithsonian Institution and a document, already typed, already formatted, awaiting only a licensed physician's signature to become an official certified finding. That was the letter Dr. Caleb Morrow received. If this is the kind of record that never made it into the history you were taught, the county newspaper accounts, the unsigned documents, the field reports that disappeared between the farm and Washington, subscribe and turn on notifications. This channel goes into the archives every week and pulls out exactly this kind of story, the ones that were buried, the ones that were never meant to surface again. What we know about the Kellner Farm excavation comes from 3 independent sources held in separate archives, never cross-referenced by any institutional researcher. The first is the Richland County Observer, issues of October 3rd, October 10th, and October 17, 1888. These are held in the Wisconsin Historical Society's newspaper collection and have been on microfilm since 1962. The second is a fragment of Dr. Morrow's private correspondence, 4 letters written between October 1888 and March 1889 to his colleague Dr. Franklin Ober in Madison, in which Morrow describes the examination and its aftermath in careful clinical language. These letters were donated to the Richland County Historical Society in 1947 by Morrow's granddaughter, who found them in a cedar box in the attic of the family home. They are indexed under Morrow CD, Personal Papers, Miscellaneous. They have been requested by exactly 3 researchers in 77 years. The third is a single entry in the Richland County Court records from November 1888, a formal complaint filed against Dr. Morrow and then withdrawn within 10 days for failure to complete a county-commissioned medical examination. The complaint names Harrison Aldred as the petitioning party. The examination date is listed as October 9, 1888. The withdrawal carries a notation in a different hand, file closed by order. 3 sources, 3 separate institutions, none of them in conversation with each other, and together they build a picture specific enough to take seriously. Here is what they tell us. Dr. Morrow arrived at the Kellner farm on the morning of October 9th. Aldred was already there. The bones had been partially reburied overnight. Morrow noted this in his letters to Ober, remarking that a find of this significance would ordinarily be left fully exposed for an examining physician. He was shown what Aldred chose to show him: the femur, the lower pelvis, and the skull. The rest of the skeleton remained beneath a canvas tarpaulin that Morrow was told covered bones too fragile for handling. He was not permitted to lift the tarpaulin. What he was permitted to examine, he examined with full professional attention. He spent the better part of 4 hours on those 3 bones alone. The femur confirmed the observer's measurement: 38 inches, consistent with an individual of between 8 and 9 feet in height. The bone density, Morrow wrote, was extraordinary, not the disordered overgrowth of acromegaly, not the irregular calcification of Paget's disease, but proportionate, symmetrical, the structural density of a body that had simply been built at a larger scale than any living population he had encountered in 16 years of practice. The skull presented identically. No cranial deformities, no sutural abnormalities that would indicate gigantism as a pathological process. The architecture, he wrote to Ober, was that of a healthy adult male of advanced years, built to a scale that had no clinical category available to him. He recorded all of it in his personal notes. Then Harrison Aldred placed the drafted report on August Kellner's kitchen table and handed Morrow a pen. The report described the remains as those of a large-framed individual of Native American origin, consistent with known burial populations of the upper Midwest, height estimated between 6 feet 4 inches and 6 feet 8 inches, no anomalous features of clinical significance. Morrow read it twice. He set the pen on the table. He folded his own notes and put them in his coat pocket. He thanked Aldred for his time. He told August Kellner he was sorry for the disruption to his drainage work. He walked to his horse and rode back to Richland Center. He never touched that pen. What happened next followed a pattern that anyone who has spent time in the documentary record of this period will recognize immediately. The bones from the Kellner farm were crated and shipped to Washington within 2 weeks of the examination. The shipping records are gone. There is no entry in the Smithsonian's Bureau of Ethnology catalog for any material received from Richland County, Wisconsin in 1888. Harrison Aldred does not appear in the Bureau's published personnel records after October of that year. He is listed in the 1888 directory. He is absent from the 1889 directory. No retirement notice, no transfer, no explanation. The formal complaint against Morrow was filed and then withdrawn. The withdrawal came 10 days after Aldred left Richland Center. The notation, file closed by order, does not specify whose order. August Kellner sold his farm in the spring of 1889, significantly below market value, to a land management company incorporated in Chicago, with no other recorded transactions in Wisconsin. He moved his family to Minnesota. His name does not appear in Richland County records after May of 1889. The Observer ran its October 17th account, noting that the remains had been taken into federal custody and that the county medical examiner had declined to issue a formal finding. It was the last mention of the Kellner Farm discovery in any newspaper yet located, not contradicted, not debunked, not explained, stopped. Step back from Richland County and look at the geography. The Wisconsin River Valley in 1888 sat at the southern edge of what independent researchers have come to identify as a continuous corridor of anomalous burial evidence running from the western shore of Lake Superior through the Lake Michigan Basin and south along the Mississippi drainage into the Ohio Valley. Site after site across this corridor, the Sauk County discoveries of 1876, the Crawford County finds of 1881, the Trempealeau County excavations documented between 1883 and 1886 produced the same pattern, large-scale remains. Local newspaper documentation by named witnesses, Smithsonian collection, institutional silence. The Wisconsin mound building tradition is genuinely old. The effigy mound builders whose earthworks survive in protected sites across the state were constructing their geometries here 2,000 years ago, but the deposits that keep surfacing beneath those mound layers, the ones associated with post-glacial lake sediments, the ones the Richland County surveyor noted were a blue-grey clay matching no local soil profile, are older, significantly older, and the remains inside them are larger. This is not a record anyone assembled intentionally. It is the record that emerged when you lay the county newspapers side by side, when you read the private letters of physicians who were asked to sign things they would not sign, when you follow the court complaints that were filed and then quietly withdrawn. The physical evidence was collected and removed and warehoused out of independent reach. What remains are the documents, and the documents, read together, describe something that the official history of the Upper Midwest has no framework to contain. Dr. Caleb Morrow practiced medicine in Richland Center for 11 more years after October 1888. He signed hundreds of reports in that time, death certificates, examination findings, county health assessments, every document his position required. His professional reputation was never formally challenged. The complaint against him was withdrawn and forgotten. His colleagues in Madison knew something had happened, but they did not press him, and he did not explain. In his last letter to Dr. Franklin Ober, written in February of 1899, 2 months before his death, he made a single final reference to the Kellner Farm. He did not relitigate the examination. He did not describe the bones again. He wrote only this, that a surgeon's signature is the most precise instrument he carries, that it means, in the plainest possible terms, I examined this, I found it to be true, and that the most consequential professional act of his life had been the act of not signing, of setting the pen down, of walking out of a Wisconsin farmhouse on an October morning with his notes in his pocket and his name still his own. His private notes from that examination were not among his papers when he died. Whether Aldred eventually retrieved them, whether Morrow destroyed them himself, or whether they are in a cedar box in some attic that has not yet been opened is not known. What is known is that the femur in that drainage channel was 38 inches long, that the skull was proportionate and healthy and built to a scale that had no clinical category, that a physician of 16 years examined it with his own hands and found it to be exactly what the county newspaper said it was, and that when a document was placed before him asking him to say otherwise, he left it on the table. The report was never signed, which means for those of us who know how to read an absence, the record is still open. That is the story of Wisconsin, 1888. The surgeon who examined a giant, and the official report he refused to sign. If this investigation found you, subscribe. Your subscription is how the next record surfaces. I will see you in the next investigation.